Good afternoon to everyone and welcome to the special edition of the National Newscast TV1. Today we're here to dig a little deeper in a story which is well known to all of us for its mysterious beginning and even its tragic ending. Let's see what I'm talking about. Breaking news: Verona is shocked. This night, the town became center of several deaths, including those of Romeo Montague and Juliet Capulet, the heirs of the old enemy families. According to local reporters, the two teenagers were secretly in love with each other, and they committed suicide in the Capulets' crypt. Quite bizarre is, however, the fact that Juliet was supposed to be already dead, and instead the prince of the town found her body stabbed and still warm, while Romeo, who had previously been exiled from Verona, is meant to have drunk some poison. The other victims are the Count Paris, probably killed by Romeo's stroke of sword, and Romeo's mother, Lady Montague, deceased at home after the announcement of her son's death. The dynamics of the drama are still unclear, and despite the fact that the prince detained and questioned many people, there are no eyewitnesses alive that can explain what happened. In conclusion, there is a positive implication in this tragedy, because ostensibly the two foes, Lord Montague and Lord Capulet, are finally going to bury the Achete after decades of rivalry. How long will this truce last, and what did really happen in that crypt? As you have noticed, no one expected a so tragic ending for two young lovers who apparently didn't have anything to do with their family's rivalry, and the love is an evidence of this, although they needed to execute a so violent act to bring peace in Verona, and I suppose we're all wondering what really happened in that crypt. But since there are no eyewitnesses, as we heard, the very least we can know is what events have suddenly led to this. That's why, hoping to make things clearer, today I invited two guests from Verona, Friar Lawrence and the nurse of the late Juliet. Let's start with Friar Lawrence. Here we are. So, first question. When the tragedy was just carried out and the prince arrived, you admitted that there was a plan devised by yourself in order to make Juliet avoid the marriage with the Count Paris and make her reconcile with Romeo. So tell us, sir, what was the plan ideally meant to be? So, when I was interrogated by the prince, I told him briefly that when he banished Romeo from Verona because he had killed Juliet's cousin Tybalt, I had just married him with the young Juliet. So when Lord Capulet announced his intention to marry Juliet with the Count Paris, she came to my cell to find a solution. And at that point, I was forced to find one, otherwise, she would have killed herself. That's why I suggested the only idea that came out of my mind in that moment. And since I am a potions and herbs enthusiast, I gave her a sleeping potion that, for it, wrought on her the forms of death. All she had to do then was going home and pretending to accept being engaged with Paris, and so that the night before the wedding she could have taken the potion all alone in her room and die. At a later time, when she was brought in the Capulet's crypt, she would have woke up finding Romeo next to her, Romeo alive, uh, and totally aware of the plan, and they would have lived happily for the rest of their lives. But of course, this didn't happen. What do you think went wrong in your plan and why? Well, there have been a lot of obstacles in this plan. First of all, the fact that Romeo hadn't received um, the letter I sent him, where I explained that Juliet just faked her death. Unfortunately, fate wanted that the messenger, Friar John, couldn't go to Mantua because it was thought to have come into contact with Black Death. Um, that's why he came back to Verona and gave me back the letter. But at that point, it was already too late because Romeo was already in the crypt. The other biggest problem was also the fact that Lord Capulet anticipated the marriage of his daughter and Paris of one day, and so it was even less possible for Romeo to be aware of the plan in time. Besides, I should admit that everything happened too quickly, like in 3 days. So you have to imagine that I couldn't realize anything, that in a while something else happened. I understand, Father, but according to your confession, you were ready to die because, in a way, you felt guilty for what happened to Romeo and Juliet, even though the prince decided to absolve you. Why did you feel so guilty then? Weren't their deaths predictable, in your opinion? I'd like to point out something first, if you allow me. That's a good question, though. The only reason why I feel so guilty is because I haven't been able to prevent Romeo and Juliet from committing a so heavy sin like suicide. They both threatened to kill themselves in my presence once, and the reason why I did what I did is because I aimed to avoid um, these actions, and in contrast, I led to them. That's why I'm indeed guilty. That said, I believe that the two lovers' deaths were quite predictable since their families were still in contrast with each other, and conversely, just their sacrifice could put an end to those struggles. These violent delights have violent ends, I said once, and just now I realized that I was always right, even when Romeo was exiled and he still wanted to stay in Verona with his wife Juliet. Um, I remember I was so mad at him and said, take heed, for such die miserable." Perhaps there was even no way to impede that all these things could happen. If Romeo and Juliet had never met each other, she would have been unhappy with Paris, and Romeo would have suffered for the rest of his life for the other person he loved, Rosaline. And in my opinion, they would have still killed themselves because they don't have respect for life. They because being alive isn't enough to be happy. They wanted more. They risked, and they committed a violent act, and now they are dead. Okay. I don't mean to upset you anymore, Father. Thank you so much for what you shared with us today. And now, let's talk a bit with the nurse of Juliet Capulet. Welcome to the studio, and thank you so much for being here, even though I know you're still very tried since the tragedy happened just yesterday. So, given that you were the nurse of Juliet Capulet, you were very close to her and knew everything about her, right? The point is, did you know anything about the plan as well? Or at least, did you notice anything weird, unusual in her behavior the days before the suicide? Oh, no, miss, no. She always told me everything about her feelings, and I knew her as if she was my daughter. Well, maybe you don't know this, but she was born the same day of my late daughter Laura, and now they're together with God. I'm sorry. Uh, she told me everything I was about to say, and but the when she came back from Freya Lawrence's cell, um, she like said nothing. She wanted to go in her bedroom and stay alone and pray before the wedding. Of course, now I guess she was doing something else. Anyway, that was probably the only strange thing I noticed in her behavior uh, the days before um, uh, the suicide. Notwithstanding, it is to say that since she met the young Montague at the ball, her behavior totally changed. At first, she was a very obedient girl, a very obedient daughter, and then, because of course she had no reason to disobey her father, and then Romeo gave her that reason, which is love. And at that point, no one could stop her because she matured the idea of freedom and of choice, and she knew what she wanted in her life. Thanks also to the fact that she was overwhelmed by opposing feelings and she had to make a decision. For example, um, she loved Romeo, but she was also frustrated for the fact that he was supposed to be her fierce rival. Now that you listen to Friar Lawrence and you're really aware of how things went, have you imagined um, what could have changed in this situation if you had come to know about Julia's intention to take that potion? My dear you knew that I would have certainly stopped her if someone had let me know about the what she intended to do. And there's no doubt that this is the reason why she kept me in the dark about the schedule. However, this makes me reflect with her convincing skills. I would have probably helped her in the plan if she had asked me to, like I did when I proposed to Romeo, in place of a. Even though I should admit that my reaction in finding her dead wouldn't have seemed natural. Of course, if I had been involved in the fire's plan. Nonetheless, as a person who's always taken care of her, all I wished for her was happiness. And in my opinion, she could have lived happily, even with the Count Paris, but that was not what she wanted. And I probably understood this when she disclosed me her intention to marry Romeo. The day after, she said firmly that she didn't felt ready yet um, for becoming a wife, nor for the Count Paris, nor for anyone. But on one hand, uh, I'm glad that she found her soulmate and that she married the person she loved. While on the other hand, I I would definitely have preferred to be less happy, but still alive. Last question, a very important one. Do you think that this love story between enemies was impossible since the first beginning? Frankly, I totally agree with what Friar Lawrence said from this point of view. Fate is the only thing accountable in all this situation, and um, Romeo and Juliet needed to find each other, to meet each other, to love each other, and to die together. So their own love springs from the fact that they were supposed to hate one another, but this belief has been overthrown um, since they saw each other for the first time at the ball, when those names Montague and Capulet didn't mean anything yet for them, and their sacrifice led to peace. A glooming peace with it brings this morning, said the prince to all citizens, and yeah, not just in Verona, even in heaven, because now they can love each other freely. Thank you so much. You shared with us very important information as well. And now that we threw light on this tragic story, we can finally assert that it all happened because of fate. In conclusion, before throwing to the other programs, I'd like to invite you all to keep quiet for a while in honor of the two star-crossed lovers. Thank you so much for watching and have a nice day.